The microphone screeched feedback across the hotel ballroom, and Vivienne Torres felt her stomach drop as her ex-boyfriend climbed onto the stage uninvited. She had known coming to the annual Marketing Summit Gala would be risky. Marcus worked in the same industry, attended the same events, but she'd spent 3 months rebuilding herself after their breakup and refused to let him take any more from her. The event was being live-streamed to thousands of professionals across the country, a standard practice for their industry's biggest night, and she'd been sitting quietly at her company's table near the back, nursing a glass of wine and trying to look composed. Marcus grabbed the microphone from the bewildered keynote speaker with the easy charm that had fooled her for 2 years. His suit was expensive, his smile bright, and Vivienne recognized the particular glint in his eyes that meant he was about to say something cruel, disguised as a joke. Sorry, I'll be quick," Marcus said, his voice booming through the speakers. "I just saw someone in the audience tonight and had to share a little story. My ex-girlfriend, Vivienne Torres, is here, Viv. Stand up, don't be shy." Vivienne's hands went numb. Around her, colleagues turned to stare. She remained frozen in her seat. "We dated for 2 years, and let me tell you, I tried. I really tried." Marcus shook his head with exaggerated sympathy. "But some people are just meant to be alone, you know? Too difficult, too demanding, too much work. I told her when we broke up, and I'll say it publicly now because maybe it'll help her adjust her expectations. No one will ever want you, Viv. Not the way you are. You're just too much effort for too little reward." Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, not kind laughter, but the nervous, uncertain kind that happens when people don't know if they're witnessing comedy or cruelty and choose to play along. The camera operator kept filming, the red light steady and unblinking. Vivienne's face burned, her throat closed. She needed to leave, needed to run, but her legs wouldn't move and she couldn't seem to make her body obey her mind's desperate commands. Then someone stood. The movement was smooth and unhurried, drawing every eye in the ballroom. The man who rose from a table near the front was tall and striking in a way that made the entire room fall silent. His hair was pure white, falling to his shoulders in a way that should have looked affected, but instead looked regal. His skin was pale as marble, and when he turned toward the stage, Vivienne saw that his eyes were a deep crimson that seemed to catch and hold the light. She knew what he was immediately. Everyone did. Vampires had revealed themselves to humanity 15 years ago, and while they remained rare and largely kept to their own societies, their appearance was unmistakable. This one carried himself with the particular authority that suggested significant rank within vampire hierarchy. "You will return the microphone to its proper owner and sit down," the vampire said quietly, but his voice carried through the ballroom without any electronic assistance, resonant and absolute. Marcus's smile faltered. "Hey man, I'm almost done." "You are entirely done." The vampire began walking toward the stage with measured steps. "You have said enough." Something in his tone made Marcus set down the microphone and retreat, though he tried to laugh it off as he descended the stairs. The keynote speaker reclaimed her microphone with a grateful nod, but the vampire did not return to his seat. Instead, he turned to face the camera directly. "I must correct a serious misstatement that was just made," he said, his accent British and old, the kind that suggested he'd learned English before it sounded like it did now. "The woman who was just maligned, Vivienne Torres, is not unwanted. She is in fact my intended. We have been engaged for some weeks now, though we had planned to announce it privately. Given the circumstances, I believe a public correction is warranted." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Vivienne's mouth fell open. Her grace under pressure, her kindness despite receiving little in return, her strength in the face of small cruelties, these are qualities that drew my attention and secured my devotion, the vampire continued, his red eyes never leaving the camera. "Miss Torres is a woman of considerable worth, and I am honored that she has agreed to share her life with mine. I apologize, my love, for revealing our engagement in such an unceremonious manner, but I could not allow those lies to stand unchallenged." He inclined his head toward Vivienne then, a gesture of respect that looked like something from a different century, and then he walked out of the ballroom without another word. The keynote speaker tried valiantly to resume her presentation, but it was hopeless. Everyone was talking, phones were out, and Vivienne could see social media notifications exploding across nearby screens. Her own phone buzzed insistently in her clutch. She stood on shaking legs and walked out of the ballroom as quickly as dignity allowed, ignoring the stares and whispered questions. Her coworker Janet called after her, but Vivienne kept moving, pushing through the hotel lobby toward the exit, needing air and space and somewhere to think. The night air hit her face like a shock. She gulped it down, pressed her back against the hotel's stone exterior, and tried to process what had just happened. She was not engaged. She had never met that vampire before in her life. He had just announced their engagement to thousands of people on a live broadcast, and by now the clip would be spreading across every platform, shared and reshared until it reached millions. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She pulled it out with trembling hands and saw texts from her mother, her sister, college friends she hadn't spoken to in years, all of them some variation of, "Oh my God, is it true? And you're engaged to a vampire?" The marketing industry Twitter feed was already exploding with the clip. Someone had titled it, "Vampire King Defends His Fiancée After Ex's Public Humiliation," and it had 10,000 retweets in the minutes since it happened. Vivienne was going to be sick. "Miss Torres," she spun around. The vampire stood a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back, posture perfect. Up close, he was even more striking, beautiful in the alien way vampires often were, with fine-boned features and an otherworldly quality that marked him as something other than human. "Stay away from me," Vivienne managed, her voice shaking. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but we are not engaged. You had no right—" "You are correct," he interrupted quietly. "I had no right. I have taken a liberty I should not have taken, and for that I apologize. However, I stand by the substance of what I said. Everything that man said about you was false." "You don't know me," Vivienne said. "You don't know anything about me." Something flickered in his expression. "I know more than you might think. My name is Quintus Kassiel. I have attended these industry events for the past year as part of my house's investment portfolio. I have seen you at 4 previous gatherings. I've watched the way you carry yourself, the way you treat staff with respect, the way you defended a junior colleague when her supervisor attempted to claim credit for her work at the spring conference. I've observed the small cruelties your former partner inflicted, the dismissive comments, the subtle undermining, the way he diminished your accomplishments in public while taking credit for your ideas in private." Vivienne stared at him. "You've been watching me?" "I have been noticing you," Quintus corrected. "There is a difference. You drew my attention through your character, and I found I could not look away. When I learned you had ended your relationship with that man, I intended to approach you properly, to introduce myself, and express my interest with appropriate courtesy. Tonight's events forced my hand." "By claiming we're engaged?" Vivienne's shock was giving way to anger now, hot and clarifying. "By lying to thousands of people? By making a decision about my life without consulting me?" "Yes," Quintus said simply. "I'm aware that I have erred. The engagement I announced was not false in terms of my intent. I do sincerely wish to court you with marriage as the ultimate goal, but you are absolutely correct that I should not have announced anything without your consent. I allowed my anger at that man's behavior to override my judgment." "Vampires don't get angry," Vivienne said. It was common knowledge vampires were known for their preternatural calm, their emotional control. "We get angry," Quintus said, and for a moment something dangerous flashed in those crimson eyes. "We simply do not often show it. Watching someone attempt to destroy you for his own amusement inspired considerable rage, and I acted on it without proper thought. That was wrong." Vivienne's phone buzzed again and again. She looked down and saw she had 200 unread messages now. "What am I supposed to tell people? This is going to be everywhere. My family, my job, everyone I know thinks I'm engaged to." She gestured at him helplessly. "To a vampire I've never even spoken to before." "Tell them the truth," Quintus said. "Tell them I overstepped and you are considering your options, or tell them we are engaged if you prefer that narrative. The choice is yours." "The choice was always supposed to be mine," Vivienne said, and her voice cracked. "You didn't just defend me. You claimed me, on camera, in front of everyone. You made me part of a story without asking if I wanted to be in it." Quintus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, less certain. "You are right. I acted as though you needed saving, as though you could not handle the situation yourself. That was presumptuous and disrespectful. You survived 2 years with that man and emerged strong enough to leave him. You did not need my intervention. I wanted to give you justice, but I stole your agency in the process. That was not justice at all. Despite everything, despite her anger and confusion and the surreal nightmare of the evening, Vivienne found herself slightly disarmed by his directness. He wasn't making excuses or trying to convince her his actions had been romantic. He was simply acknowledging the harm. "What did you call yourself?" she asked. "A house? Are you actually a king?" "Not a king, no. That term was an assumption made by whoever titled the video. I am the head of House Kassiel, one of the 7 great houses of vampire society. In human terms, I might be considered equivalent to a lord or perhaps a duke. My house has existed for 3,000 years. I am the 9th bearer of the name Quintus to lead it." 3,000 years. Vivienne's mind reeled. "How old are you?" "I have walked this earth for 847 years. I was turned in the year of your calendar 1178 in what is now England." 847 years old. He'd been alive during the Crusades, during the Black Death, during the entire history of America from colonization to now. "Why are you at marketing conferences?" Vivienne asked, because it was easier to focus on that incongruity than on the enormity of everything else. "House Kassiel has extensive business interests in the modern world. We must adapt to changing times or become irrelevant. I oversee our investments personally. The marketing industry shapes human behavior and culture. It seemed prudent to understand it." He paused. "Also, you were there." "Don't," Vivienne said sharply. "Don't make this romantic. You violated my consent. That's not the beginning of a love story." "No," Quintus agreed. "It is the beginning of an apology, if you will allow me to make it. I understand if you will not." Vivienne's phone buzzed again. She looked down and saw her mother calling for the 5th time. "I need to go. I need to figure out what I'm going to say to everyone. May I offer a suggestion?" When Vivienne nodded warily, Quintus continued. "Tell them that we have been seeing each other quietly and that tonight's announcement was premature but not fabricated. That gives you time to decide what you actually want without facing immediate questions about why a vampire would lie about being engaged to you. Humans tend to assume vampires do not lie. It may be easier to work within that assumption than against it." It was, Vivienne had to admit, a practical solution. "And what do you get out of this suggested deception?" "Time to prove to you that my interest is genuine," Quintus said. "Time to court you properly, as I should have done from the beginning. If you grant me that time and decide I am not suitable, I will publicly announce that our engagement has ended by mutual agreement. You will face no stigma." "Vampires don't get dumped," Vivienne said. "Everyone knows that. They're the ones who leave." "Then you will be notable," Quintus said. "I suspect you are strong enough to weather that notoriety." Despite everything, Vivienne felt the corner of her mouth twitch. He was either the most arrogant being she'd ever met or the most honest. Possibly both. "I'm not agreeing to anything," she said, "but I'll think about your suggestion. Don't contact me. If I decide to speak to you again, I'll reach out." "How?" Quintus asked. "I should provide you with contact information." Vivienne looked at him, at this ancient vampire who commanded a house and wore his authority like a second skin. "You've been watching me for months. I'm sure you can figure out how to leave me your number without violating my boundaries further." Something that might have been respect crossed his features. "Fair enough. Good evening, Miss Torres. I truly am sorry." He inclined his head in that old-fashioned gesture again and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the parking lot with the preternatural speed of his kind. Vivienne stood there for a moment longer, breathing the night air, trying to compose herself. Then she called her mother back and prepared to explain the unexplainable. The next morning, Vivienne woke to find that the video had indeed gone viral. It had 15 million views across various platforms. There were think pieces about vampire-human relationships, speculation about vampire royalty, and entire threads dedicated to identifying Marcus and dragging him for his cruel stunt. There were also flowers. Someone had left an enormous arrangement of white roses on her apartment doorstep. The card read simply, "For taking up space in your thoughts without permission. QK." Vivienne brought them inside, despite herself. Her phone rang constantly all weekend. Her mother wanted details. Her sister wanted to know if vampires could have children with humans, a question Vivienne had no idea how to answer. Her boss called to ask if this would affect her work, his tone suggesting he wasn't sure whether to congratulate her or be concerned. Janet from work called with more practical concerns. "Are you safe? I mean, is this real? Because if some ancient vampire is obsessed with you, that could be dangerous." "I'm fine," Vivienne said, which was only partly true. "He's been respectful. Well, mostly respectful." "Viv, he announced your engagement on live television without asking you." "I know. We're dealing with it. Are you actually going to see him again?" Vivienne looked at the white roses on her kitchen counter. "I don't know yet." But she was thinking about it. She'd spent all of Saturday researching House Kassiel and found that Quintus had been telling the truth about his status. House Kassiel was indeed one of the 7 great houses with extensive holdings in Europe and North America. Quintus himself appeared rarely in photographs, but when he did, it was at significant political events or major business dealings. He was described in articles as formidable, intensely private, and a vampire of considerable old-world honor. There was no suggestion anywhere that he was unstable or dangerous beyond the danger inherent in his nature. Vampires could kill humans easily if they chose, but the treaty signed after the revelation forbade unauthorized feeding and mandated strict consequences for violence against humans. House Kassiel had a reputation for following treaty law to the letter. On Sunday evening, Vivienne found a business card slipped under her door. It contained a phone number and nothing else, but she recognized the handwriting from the flower card. She stared at it for a long time. Finally, she picked up her phone and typed out a text. "This is Vivienne Torres. We need to talk about boundaries and expectations." The response came within seconds. "Yes. When and where would you be comfortable meeting?" "Public place, neutral ground. Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock. The coffee shop on 7th Street. I will be there. Thank you for this opportunity." Vivienne set down her phone and wondered what she was getting herself into. Tuesday evening arrived cold and clear. Vivienne chose her clothing carefully professional, but not formal. A deep green blouse and dark jeans that made her feel confident without looking like she was trying too hard. She arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the back corner where they could speak with relative privacy. Quintus arrived exactly at 7. He wore modern clothing, dark slacks, and a charcoal sweater, but somehow still looked like he belonged in a different century. His white hair was tied back, and his red eyes scanned the room before settling on her with obvious relief. "Miss Torres," he said quietly, approaching the table. "May I sit?" "That's why we're here," Vivienne said. He sat with the same preternatural grace she was beginning to recognize as characteristic. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. "I've been thinking about what you said," Vivienne began. "About watching me for months. That should disturb me more than it does." "Does it disturb you?" Quintus asked. "Yes and no. You weren't stalking me. You were attending events we both had professional reasons to attend. And honestly, I had noticed you too. It's hard not to notice a vampire, especially one who looks like you do." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps. "You noticed me?" "Of course I noticed you. I just didn't think you'd noticed me back, and I certainly never imagined you'd announce an engagement I hadn't agreed to." She kept her voice level, matter of fact. "That's what we need to address. You said you wanted to court me properly. What does that mean to you?" Quintus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words with visible care. "It means proceeding at your pace, not mine. It means asking rather than assuming. It means recognizing that devotion offered without consent is simply control by another name, regardless of the kindness of intent. I have lived a very long time, Miss Torres, and I am accustomed to authority. I make decisions that affect hundreds of people within my house. But that does not give me the right to make decisions about your life." "No, it doesn't," Vivienne agreed. "I spent 2 years with Marcus being told that my opinions didn't matter, that I was too sensitive, that I should be grateful for his attention. I won't accept that dynamic again, not even dressed up in prettier language." "I would never want you to," Quintus said with quiet intensity. "What attracted me to you was precisely your strength, your refusal to be diminished. I do not want to change you. I want to know you. Vivienne studied him. Why me? There must be vampire women who would be more suitable matches, or humans who move in your circles, who understand your world. There are many suitable matches, Quintus acknowledged. I have been introduced to countless eligible women, human and vampire alike, over the centuries. I have had relationships, some quite lengthy by human standards, but I have not felt drawn to anyone the way I am drawn to you. I cannot fully explain it. When I see you, I see someone who moves through the world with grace despite its small cruelties, someone who gives kindness even when she receives little in return, someone who stands up for others even when it costs her. These are rare qualities. They matter to me. Those are things you've observed from a distance, Vivienne pointed out. You don't actually know me. No, Quintus agreed. That is why I wish to court you, to learn who you are beyond what I have observed, to give you the opportunity to learn who I am as well, and to decide if you find that person acceptable. A barista called out a drink order, breaking the intensity of the moment. Vivienne glanced around the coffee shop, aware that several people were watching them with barely concealed curiosity. The video had made her recognizable, at least in her own city. We're going to be watched constantly, she said. That video's everywhere. People recognize me now. They'll definitely recognize you. Does that trouble you? It's invasive. I didn't ask for this level of attention. No, you did not. I brought that attention to you through my actions. If you wish to stop this now, I will announce that we have parted ways and do my best to redirect attention away from you. Vivienne considered that. It would be the sensible choice, probably. End this before it became more complicated. Return to her normal life. Let the story die down. But she found she didn't want to. Marcus had spent 2 years making her feel small, unwanted, like she was asking for too much simply by existing. And here was something who claimed to have watched her for months and been drawn to her strength rather than put off by it. Someone who acknowledged his mistakes directly instead of gaslighting her about whether they'd happened. It might be a terrible idea. He was a vampire, ancient and dangerous and from a completely different world. But it might also be something extraordinary. I want ground rules, Vivienne said, if we're going to try this. Anything you require. First, no more public announcements about our relationship without discussing them with me first. Second, you don't make decisions about my safety or my life without my input. Third, we go slow. I'm not agreeing to marriage, I'm agreeing to dating, getting to know each other. If it doesn't work out, we both walk away cleanly. Agreed, Quintus said immediately. Fourth, I need you to be honest with me about vampire things, about what you are, what you need, how your world works. I can't make informed decisions if I don't understand what I'm getting into. I will answer any question you ask truthfully. Can you drink coffee? Vivienne asked, or is it blood only? A slight smile touched his mouth, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look less ancient and more approachable. I can consume coffee, though I derive no nutrition from it. It tastes pleasant enough. Would you like me to order something so I appear less conspicuous? You're a 6-foot-tall vampire with white hair and red eyes sitting in a coffee shop. You're going to be conspicuous regardless, but yes, order something anyway. Quintus rose and went to the counter, and Vivienne watched him interact with the young barista who looked absolutely starstruck. He ordered with quiet courtesy, thanked her, and returned to the table with a black coffee. Does it bother you? He asked, settling back into his chair. What I am? I'm not sure yet, Vivienne admitted. Vampires have been public for 15 years, but most people don't actually interact with them regularly. I've served vampire clients at the firm a few times, but it's different when it's personal. You drink blood to survive. Yes, we have legal sources donated blood, purchased from willing providers. I have not taken blood from an unwilling source in 600 years, since before the great houses formalized their code of conduct. But you did before that. Yes. He did not flinch from the admission. I was a different person then. The world was different. That is explanation, not excuse. I harmed people in my early centuries, and I carry that weight. Modern ethics and our treaty obligations have provided structure that I believe is morally correct. I follow them by choice, not merely obligation. Vivienne absorbed that. What happened 600 years ago that changed things? I became lord of my house. The position comes with responsibility for hundreds of lives, both vampire and human. It requires thinking beyond one's own immediate needs or desires. It demands honor. I chose to accept those demands. What about sunlight? The weaknesses everyone talks about. Sunlight is lethal, yes. Direct exposure would kill me within minutes, severe burns within seconds. I must be careful about dawn and dusk, about reflected light through windows. Invitations into homes are not required despite mythology, but crossing a threshold uninvited does cause discomfort. Religious symbols have no effect. Garlic is simply unpleasant. Running water does not harm us. Silver causes pain similar to an allergic reaction, but is not fatal. Wooden stakes would kill me, yes, as would beheading or fire. We are difficult to kill, but not impossible. The clinical way he discussed his own mortality disturbed Vivienne more than she wanted to admit. How do you spend your days if you can't go out in sunlight? House business, mostly. I oversee investments, manage disputes, handle diplomatic relations with other houses and with human governments. I read extensively. I have many years of accumulated interests, art, music, literature, history lived rather than studied. My house maintains several residences that are built to exclude all sunlight, allowing me to move freely within them. It is not as limiting as you might think. But you'll never see another sunrise, Vivienne said softly. Something shifted in his expression, a flash of old grief. No, that is a loss I carry. The sky at dawn was beautiful in ways I can no longer witness, but I have gained other things. Time to watch the world change and grow, the ability to protect those under my care across centuries, a different perspective on what matters. Do you get lonely, living that long? Sometimes, Quintus admitted. Watching humans I care for age and die while I remain unchanged is difficult. Most vampires choose not to form close attachments to humans for that reason. But I find that the alternative, complete isolation within vampire society, is lonelier still. We need connection to remain human in the ways that matter, even if we are no longer human in body. Vivienne's coffee had gone cold while they talked. She wrapped her hands around the cup anyway, needing something to hold. This is insane. I'm sitting here discussing dating someone who was alive during the Middle Ages. The High Middle Ages, technically. I missed the early period. She laughed despite herself. That's not actually better. No, I suppose not. His red eyes held hers. I understand if this is too much. The differences between us are substantial. The differences are terrifying, Vivienne said honestly. You've had centuries to figure out who you are. I'm 28 years old and still working out what I want from life. You're the head of a house that's existed for 3,000 years. I'm a mid-level marketing strategist who shares an apartment with a roommate. How would this even work? The same way any relationship works, Quintus said. We would spend time together, learn each other's rhythms and preferences, discover whether we make each other's lives richer or simply more complicated. The external differences matter less than the question of whether we suit each other in temperament and values. And if we don't? Then we part ways with respect and goodwill, as you requested. I have no desire to trap you, Vivienne. The use of her first name felt intimate, intentional. May I call you that? Or do you prefer Miss Torres? Vivienne is fine. What do people call you? Quintus seems formal. My house calls me Lord Kassiel. Close associates use Quintus. You may use whichever feels appropriate. I'll start with Quintus and see how it feels. Vivienne took a breath. Okay, let's try this. Actual dating, like normal people, or as normal as possible given the circumstances. What does that entail? Dinner? Maybe. Conversation. Activities we both enjoy. Getting to know each other without cameras or public announcements or viral videos. That sounds acceptable. I would enjoy that. He paused. I should warn you that the announcement has caused complications within vampire society. Some members of other houses are displeased that I would announce an engagement to a human without prior consultation with the Vampire Council. There's a council. The heads of the 7 great houses meet quarterly to discuss matters affecting vampire society. Relationships with humans, particularly formal engagements, are typically reviewed to ensure they do not violate treaty terms or create political complications. by announcing our engagement publicly before consulting them. I broke protocol. Vivienne felt her stomach sink. So I've caused problems for you politically. No, I caused problems for myself by acting impulsively. You bear no responsibility for that. What kind of problems? Quintus was quiet for a moment. There will be a formal inquiry. Some houses may use this as an opportunity to challenge my authority or my house's standing. One house in particular, House Mordain, has been seeking to undermine House Kassiel for decades. This gives them ammunition. What happens if they successfully challenge you? At worst, I could be removed as lord of my house, though that is unlikely. More probably, they will demand concessions or political favors. It is maneuvering and posturing, the way power operates in vampire society. I have weathered such challenges before. I don't want to be the reason you lose your position. You are not the reason. My choice is the reason. Do not take ownership of consequences that belong to me. It was strange how safe that made her feel, the way he refused to let her carry blame that was not hers. Marcus had spent their entire relationship making his unhappiness her responsibility. Quintus seemed determined to do the opposite. "When is this inquiry?" she asked. 2 weeks. It will be held at the council hall in New York. I must attend and defend my actions. Do I need to be there? No, humans are not typically involved in council proceedings. Though, if you wish to attend, I believe I could make the argument that you should be present, given that you are the subject of discussion. Vivienne thought about that. Let me consider it. I might want to be there. If they're discussing me, I should have a voice. Quintus looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Most humans would prefer to avoid the Vampire Council entirely. They can be intimidating. I'm sure they can. But I'm tired of other people making decisions about my life while I sit quietly and accept it. Then by all means, attend. I will arrange it. They talked for another hour, the conversation ranging from the practical to the profound. Vivienne learned that Quintus had been a minor nobleman before his turning, that he'd lived through the Black Death by hiding in his estate's cellar, that he'd watched the Renaissance transform art and science, that he'd witnessed the birth of the modern world with fascination and sometimes horror. In return, she told him about growing up in Texas, about her family, about how she'd moved to the city for college and stayed because she loved the energy and possibility of it. She told him about her work, about the satisfaction of crafting campaigns that connected people with products they actually needed. She even told him, haltingly, about Marcus, about the slow erosion of her confidence, the way she'd started to believe his criticism was truth. He was wrong about you, Quintus said quietly, comprehensively, entirely wrong. I'm starting to believe that, Vivienne admitted, but it's hard to unlearn 2 years of being told you're too much. You're not too much. You're exactly sufficient, perfect in your completeness. It should have sounded like a line, but the way he said it, straightforward and factual, made it feel real. When the coffee shop began closing, they walked out together into the night. The street was quiet, lit by street lamps and the glow from apartment windows above closed shops. May I see you again? Quintus asked. Perhaps dinner this weekend? I'd like that. Friday? Friday, I will make arrangements and send you details. Is there cuisine you prefer? Surprise me, but nowhere too fancy. I want to be able to actually talk, not worry about which fork to use. Understood. I will aim for comfortable rather than impressive. They stood there for a moment, the night air cold around them, looking at each other. Vivienne wondered if he would try to kiss her, if that was something vampires did on first dates, if she wanted him to. But Quintus simply inclined his head in that old-fashioned gesture again. Good night, Vivienne. Thank you for giving me this chance. Good night, Quintus. Thank you for respecting my boundaries. She watched him walk away, disappearing into shadow with unnatural speed, and then she headed home, her mind full of possibilities and questions she'd never imagined she'd be asking. The week passed in a strange blur of normalcy and surreal adjustment. Work continued as usual, though colleagues kept asking carefully casual questions about her engagement. Vivienne deflected with vague answers about taking things slow and keeping her private life private, which satisfied most people. Marcus tried to call her twice. She blocked his number. Friday evening arrived, and with it, a car service to pick her up. The driver delivered her to a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood. the kind of place that looked unassuming from the outside, but proved to be exquisite within. Quintus waited at a table in a private corner, rising as she approached. "You look lovely," he said simply. Vivienne had chosen a simple blue dress, comfortable but elegant. "Thank you. This place is perfect." They settled into dinner, and Vivienne discovered that Quintus had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. He told stories about historical figures he'd met at a disastrous dinner with Lord Byron, attending the premiere of a Mozart opera, watching the Wright brothers' flight from a distance because he'd happened to be in North Carolina on house business. "You've lived through everything," Vivienne said, amazed. "Every major moment in history." "I have lived through many moments," Quintus corrected. "But history is not only made by famous people at famous events, it is made by ordinary people making ordinary choices every day. Those moments are equally worth witnessing." "Is that why you were watching me? Because I'm ordinary?" "I was watching you because you are extraordinary in your ordinariness, if that makes sense. You are not famous or powerful, but you move through the world with integrity and grace. That is rare. That matters." Vivienne felt her chest tighten with emotion she couldn't quite name. "You barely know me." "I know enough to want to know more. Is that not the point of this? Discovery?" "Yes," Vivienne admitted. "I suppose it is." Over tiramisu, she asked him the question that had been bothering her. "What do you actually want from this relationship? Long term, I mean. You announced an engagement, which implies marriage. But we've only just started dating. What's the end goal here?" Quintus set down his fork, giving the question serious consideration. "Honestly, I want a partner, someone who sees me clearly and chooses to remain anyway, someone whose presence makes existence feel less like an endless march through time and more like a life worth living. I have wealth and power and immortality, but those things are meaningless without genuine connection. If this," he gestured between them, "develops into something lasting, then yes, I would want marriage. I would want you to choose to share your life with mine, however long that life might be. I'm human. I'm going to age. Eventually, I'm going to die." "Yes," he said it softly, but she heard the weight behind it. That is the difficulty with loving humans. You are all temporary and the loss is significant. But the alternative is never loving anyone, never risking pain, never allowing myself to feel deeply. That is not life. That is merely existence. You said loving. We've been on 2 dates. I said if this develops into love. I am not declaring feelings prematurely. I learned that lesson with the engagement announcement. But I am explaining what I am hoping for, as you asked." "Fair enough." Vivienne took a breath. "There's something else we need to discuss. The physical aspect. I've read that vampires can have relationships with humans, but the details are vague. How does that work? Are you asking if I can be intimate with you without harming you?" "Yes, I can. Vampires experience desire and can act on it safely with human partners. There is risk my strength is substantially greater than yours, and there is always the potential issue of blood, but I am 800 years old. I have excellent control. I would not initiate intimacy unless I was certain I could maintain that control throughout." Vivienne felt her face heat. "And the blood thing? Do you need to feed during—" "No. Feeding and intimacy are separate acts, though they can be combined if both parties consent. I would never feed from you without explicit permission, in or out of an intimate context." "Have you been with human women before?" "Yes, several times across the centuries. Long-term relationships, not casual encounters. I do not engage in intimacy lightly." "And they were okay? You didn't hurt them?" "One died of old age after we shared 30 years together. One chose to end our relationship to marry a human man, which I supported. One was killed in an accident unrelated to me, which devastated me for decades. All of them lived full lives and were unharmed by our relationship. I protected them to the best of my ability." Vivienne processed that. "So you've done this before, the human relationship thing?" "Yes. Does that trouble you?" "No, it's actually reassuring. It means you know what you're getting into." "I know some of what I'm getting into. Every person is different. You will bring your own complications and joys that I cannot predict. That is part of the appeal." They lingered over dinner, talking until the restaurant began to close around them. Quintus paid the check after politely overruling Vivienne's attempt to split it and walked her out to the waiting car. "I enjoyed this evening immensely," he said. "May I see you again soon?" "Yes, maybe something more casual next time. All this talking is wonderful, but I'd like to see how we interact when we're doing something together." "What would you suggest? Do vampires go to museums?" "This vampire does, frequently. I find it amusing to see how historians interpret periods I actually lived through." "Then let's go to the Art Museum Sunday afternoon. They have a new medieval exhibit." Something lit in his expression genuine excitement. "I would enjoy that very much. Shall I collect you at 2? "Perfect." This time, when they parted, he took her hand briefly, his skin cool against hers. The gesture was courtly and old-fashioned, but Vivienne found she didn't mind. Sunday's museum visit revealed a different side of Quintus. He was animated in a way she hadn't seen before, pointing out inaccuracies in the exhibit labels, sharing stories about the actual use of various artifacts, explaining the social context that made certain artistic choices meaningful. "This tapestry," he said, standing before an enormous wall hanging depicting a hunting scene, "was likely made in a workshop I visited once in France. See the particular way they've rendered the dogs' faces? That was a signature technique of the master weaver there. I commissioned a piece from them for my house, though it was destroyed in a fire 2 centuries ago." "You're like a living primary source," Vivienne said, amazed. "I suppose I am, though historians rarely believe me when I offer corrections. They prefer their documented sources to an eyewitness who happens to be undead." They wandered through the galleries, Quintus's commentary transforming the static displays into living history. Vivienne found herself relaxing into his presence, enjoying the way his formal demeanor softened when he was discussing something he cared about. In the Renaissance gallery, they encountered a family with 2 young children. The little girl, perhaps 5 years old, stared openly at Quintus with wide eyes. "Are you a real vampire?" she asked in that painfully direct way children have. "I am," Quintus said gravely, crouching down to her eye level with surprising gentleness. "Do you drink blood?" "Emma," her mother hissed, mortified. "It's quite all right," Quintus assured the mother. To the child, he said, "Yes, I do, but only from willing donors who choose to share with me, just as you might choose to share your lunch with a friend." "Do you turn into a bat?" "Sadly, no. That would be convenient." "Can you fly?" "No, though I can move very quickly." "Are you going to live forever?" "I will live for a very long time, yes." "That sounds lonely." Quintus was quiet for a moment. "It can be, but I am fortunate to have good friends to share the time with." The little girl seemed satisfied with this answer and skipped off with her family, who apologized profusely before departing. Quintus rose, something pensive in his expression. "That child saw the core truth immediately," he said quietly. "It is lonely." Immortality sounds appealing in theory, but the reality is watching everyone you care for disappear while you remain. Vivienne took his hand without thinking and was surprised by her own boldness. "Is that why you're pursuing this, because you're lonely?" "Partially," he admitted, "but not only that. I am drawn to you specifically, not simply to the idea of companionship. Loneliness might have made me more open to connection, but it is not the foundation of my interest." They continued through the museum hand in hand, and Vivienne realized she felt comfortable with him in a way she hadn't expected. There was something steadying about his presence, something that made her feel valued rather than tolerated. As they were leaving, Quintus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I apologize, but I need to take this. It is my house second." "Of course." He stepped away, speaking in what sounded like Latin. The conversation was brief but clearly serious. When he returned, his expression was troubled. "I'm afraid I must cut our afternoon short. There's been an incident at one of my properties, nothing dangerous, but it requires my immediate attention." "Is everything all right?" "It will be. I'm sorry to leave so abruptly." "It's fine. You have responsibilities. I understand that." He looked relieved. "Thank you. I will call you tomorrow." "I'd like that." He saw her to a car, apologized once more, and disappeared with that unnatural speed. Vivienne rode home, wondering what kind of incident required the immediate attention of an 800-year-old vampire lord. She found out the next morning when she woke to frantic texts from Janet. "Turn on the news. Now! Vivienne fumbled for her remote and switched on the television. The news was showing footage from outside one of the city's most exclusive buildings, one that, according to the banner, housed several vampire-occupied luxury residences. The building had been vandalized. Someone had sprayed anti-vampire slurs across the facade and broken several windows. More seriously, the report mentioned that an incendiary device had been thrown through one window, though it had been extinguished before causing significant damage. Police are investigating this as a possible hate crime, the reporter said. This building is known to house several prominent vampire residents, including Lord Quintus Kassiel of House Kassiel, who recently made headlines with his engagement announcement. Vivienne's phone rang. It was Quintus. "I apologize for calling so early," he said without preamble. "Have you seen the news?" "Yes. Are you all right? Was anyone hurt?" "No one was harmed. The device was crude and easily contained. But Vivienne, this concerns you. The vandalism included your name." Her blood went cold. "What?" "They spray-painted a message suggesting that I should not be marrying a human. Your name was included in the slurs. I have hired private security to monitor your building, but I wanted you to be aware." "You think whoever did this might come after me?" "I think it is possible, and I am not willing to take that risk. The security is discreet. You will likely not notice them, but they are there. If you see anything concerning, call me immediately." Vivienne sat down heavily on her couch. "This is because of the announcement, because of the video. This is because some people harbor hatred for vampires and for humans who associate with them. That hatred is not your fault or mine. It simply exists, and we must take precautions against it." "I'm scared," Vivienne admitted. "That is reasonable. I am angry, which is also reasonable. But I will not allow anyone to harm you. You have my word on that." After they hung up, Vivienne sat for a long time, processing. The viral video had seemed like a strange romantic story, something that would make her briefly famous before fading. She hadn't considered that it might make her a target. The week that followed was tense. Vivienne went to work as usual, but was hyper-aware of her surroundings, looking for the security Quintus had mentioned. She spotted them twice, professional-looking people who seemed to be in the right place at the wrong times, lingering near her office building or her apartment with watchful eyes. Quintus called every day, checking on her. They couldn't see each other. He was dealing with the aftermath of the vandalism and preparing for the Vampire Council inquiry. But the phone calls became a steady presence in her life. "Tell me about your day," he would say, and she would describe the mundane details of meetings and projects. In return, he would share carefully edited versions of his days, leaving out the most disturbing vampire politics, but giving her a sense of his world. "House Mordain is pushing for sanctions against me," he told her Thursday evening. "They claim I have endangered vampire-human relations by making such a public announcement without council approval." "What does that mean? Sanctions?" "Fines, possibly. Restrictions on my house's activities. In the most extreme scenario, they could demand I step down as Lord, though I do not believe they have sufficient support for that. It is posturing and politics, as I expected." "I'm sorry I've caused you so much trouble." "You have caused me nothing. I created this situation through my own choices. Please stop apologizing for consequences that are not yours to bear." The inquiry was set for Saturday in New York. Vivienne made her decision on Friday. "I'm coming with you," she told Quintus during their evening call. "You do not have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. They're discussing me. I should be there." "It may be uncomfortable. The council chambers are designed to intimidate. I've handled uncomfortable before. I'll manage." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Very well. I will arrange for your travel and accommodation. We leave tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon." The private plane Quintus sent was absurdly luxurious, all leather and dark wood and quiet elegance. He was already aboard when she arrived, dressed in formal clothing that looked expensive, even by vampire standards, a perfectly tailored black suit with subtle silver threading that caught the light. "You look ready for battle," Vivienne observed, settling into the seat across from him. "In a sense, I am. Vampire politics is a form of warfare, simply with words rather than weapons." He studied her. "Are you certain about this? You can still change your mind." "I'm certain. Tell me what to expect." As the plane took flight, Quintus explained the structure of the council. 7 houses, 7 lords, all of them ancient and powerful. The council chamber would be formal and ritualistic. The inquiry would involve questions about his announcement, his intentions, and whether his actions had violated vampire law or protocol. "What do you need me to do?" Vivienne asked. "Be yourself. If they ask you questions, answer honestly. Do not try to defend me. I will handle my own defense. Simply speak your truth." "What if my truth doesn't help you?" "Then that's my burden to bear, not yours. I will not ask you to lie for me." They arrived in New York, after dark. A car took them to a building in Manhattan that looked like any other luxury high-rise from the outside, but revealed itself to be something other once they entered. The lobby was empty of humans. The doorman was a vampire with ancient eyes. The elevator descended rather than climbed, taking them deep underground. "The council chambers are below the city," Quintus explained, "built to withstand sunlight and siege. Vampires have always been cautious about security." The elevator opened onto a corridor of black marble and old wood, lit by sconces that might have been original to the medieval period. Other vampires moved through the space with purpose, all of them beautiful and strange and powerful. They stared at Vivienne as she passed. "Humans do not often come here," Quintus murmured. "You're somewhat of a curiosity." "Great. I love being stared at." His hand found hers, a gesture of support. "You're stronger than they expect. That will serve you well." The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as Quintus had warned. The room was circular, with 7 high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. Each chair bore the symbol of a house carved into its wood. The rest of the chamber was open space, designed to make whoever stood in the center feel small and exposed. Quintus led her to seats along the wall, where other observers sat in silence. She recognized several vampires from news coverage members of various houses, all of them dressed formally. "That is Lord Caspian Mordain," Quintus whispered, nodding toward a vampire with silver-white hair and cruel eyes. "He leads House Mordain. He will be the primary voice against me tonight." The 7 lords entered together, a procession of ancient power. They took their seats in silence, and the chamber doors closed with a heavy finality. Lord Mordain spoke first. "We are gathered to address the actions of Lord Quintus Kassiel, who has announced an engagement to a human female without seeking council approval and in violation of established protocol. Lord Kassiel, approach and answer for your actions." Quintus stood and walked to the center of the chamber. He looked utterly calm, completely unbothered by the scrutiny of the 7 most powerful vampires in the Western world. "I acknowledge my breach of protocol," he said clearly. "I announced my engagement to Miss Vivienne Torres publicly and without prior consultation with this council. That was a departure from tradition." "It was more than a departure," Mordain said coldly. "It was a violation of the treaty agreement that requires us to notify the council of any formal human relationships that might draw significant public attention. Your announcement has been viewed millions of times. It has sparked debates about vampire-human relations across multiple platforms. You have made our community a subject of renewed scrutiny and speculation." "I have made my house a subject of scrutiny," Quintus corrected. "The attention is on me personally, not on our community as a whole." "Do not split hairs. Kassiel, you know that any prominent vampire action reflects on all of us. Your dramatic announcement has invited unwanted attention. It has also demonstrated that vampires are capable of genuine feeling for humans." Another council member interjected, a woman with kind eyes and white hair bound in elaborate braids. "That may not be entirely negative." "Lady Seraphine, do not let sentiment cloud your judgment," Mordain snapped. "The issue is not whether Lord Kassiel has feelings. The issue is whether he followed proper protocol. He did not." "No, I did not," Quintus agreed. "I acted in the moment to correct a cruelty being inflicted on the woman I care for. I do not regret defending her, but I acknowledge that my method created complications. For that, I apologize to this council." "An apology is insufficient," Mordain said. "We must discuss appropriate consequences." "Before we do," Quintus said calmly, "I would like to call a witness. Miss Torres is present. She has agreed to answer questions if the council wishes to hear from her." Several council members looked surprised. Mordain looked furious. "This is highly irregular," he said. "So was my announcement," Quintus replied. "But if we are discussing whether my actions have harmed her or placed her in danger, should we not allow her to speak to that directly?" Lady Seraphine nodded. "I would hear from the human. Miss Torres, please approach." Vivienne's heart hammered as she stood. She walked to the center of the chamber, very aware of how human and fragile she was in this room full of immortal predators. "Miss Torres," Lady Seraphine said gently, "you were not consulted before Lord Kassiel announced your engagement. Has his action caused you harm?" Vivienne took a breath. "Yes and no. His announcement without my consent violated my boundaries and my right to make decisions about my own life. That was wrong, and he and I have discussed it extensively. However, the immediate reason for his announcement was to stop someone else from publicly humiliating me. So while his method was flawed, his intent was protective." "Are you engaged to Lord Kassiel?" Mordain demanded. "We are dating," Vivienne said carefully. "The engagement was announced prematurely. We are still in the process of getting to know each other." "So the announcement was a lie?" "It was premature, not false. There's a difference." "Did Lord Kassiel coerce you into this relationship?" "No. I am here by choice. I'm continuing to see him by choice. If I wanted to leave, I could do so at any time. But you have not left, despite his violation of your consent. I have chosen to forgive that violation after he acknowledged it and apologized. That is my right as the person who was wronged." Mordain leaned forward. "Tell me, Miss Torres, do you understand what you would be accepting if you truly married Lord Kassiel? You would be binding yourself to a creature who will watch you age and die. You would be committing to a life in the shadows, surrounded by vampires who see you as prey. You would be giving up any hope of a normal human existence. I understand the complications," Vivienne said steadily. "I'm not naive, but I'm also not interested in being told what I should or shouldn't want by people who don't know me." Several council members looked startled. One actually smiled. Mordain's expression darkened. "You are remarkably bold for someone so fragile." "I've had a lot of practice lately," Vivienne said. "Miss Torres, you may return to your seat," Lady Seraphine said, and Vivienne thought she saw approval in the older vampire's eyes. The inquiry continued for another hour, with various council members questioning Quintus about his intentions, his security preparations, and his plans for managing public attention. Through it all, Quintus remained calm and factual, acknowledging his errors while firmly defending his right to pursue a relationship with whom he chose. Finally, the council withdrew to deliberate. Vivienne and Quintus sat in silence, waiting. When the council returned, Lady Seraphine spoke. "Lord Kassiel, this council finds that you did violate protocol by announcing your engagement without prior consultation. However, we also acknowledge that your actions were taken in defense of your intended partner and were not malicious in nature. Therefore, we impose the following consequences: a formal censure to be noted in House records and a requirement that you provide monthly security reports to this council for the next year, detailing any threats or complications arising from your public relationship. Additionally, if you and Miss Torres do formally become engaged, you will submit to a proper review process before any public announcement. Do you accept these terms?" "I do," Quintus said without hesitation. "Then this matter is concluded. This inquiry is—" "Wait," Mordain interrupted. "I have additional concerns." Lady Seraphine sighed. "Lord Mordain, we have reached a decision. I question whether Lord Kassiel is fit to continue leading his house if he allows personal feelings to override his judgment to such an extent. I move that we open a separate inquiry into his fitness for leadership." The chamber went very still. "That is a serious accusation," another council member said quietly. "It is a necessary one. Kassiel has shown poor judgment. He has exposed himself and his human to danger. Did we all not see the news about the attack on his property? He is allowing sentiment to compromise his effectiveness. Perhaps it is time for House Kassiel to have new leadership." Quintus's expression did not change, but Vivienne felt the temperature in the room drop. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet and very dangerous. "You may question my judgment, Mordain. You may not question my effectiveness as lord of my house. House Kassiel has prospered under my leadership for 6 centuries. We have honored every treaty, met every obligation, and maintained impeccable standing. If you wish to challenge my position, then issue a formal challenge as protocol allows. But do not hide behind concern for my judgment when your true goal is to weaken my house for your own political gain. Mordain stood, his eyes blazing red. You dare accuse me of— I dare state facts, Quintus said, and despite his quiet tone, his voice filled the chamber with undeniable authority. You have sought to undermine House Kassiel since the trade dispute 40 years ago when the council ruled in my favor. You have never forgiven that loss. This inquiry is simply your latest attempt to find leverage against me. I will not give you that satisfaction. Enough, Lady Seraphine said sharply. Lord Mordain, if you wish to issue a formal challenge to Lord Kassiel's leadership, you may do so through proper channels. But we will not transform tonight's inquiry into a broader political battle. The matter before us is resolved. This council is adjourned. She struck the gavel, and the sound echoed through the chamber with finality. The council members departed, though Lord Mordain shot one last venomous look at Quintus before leaving. Vivienne stood on shaky legs, the adrenaline of the past hours finally hitting her system. Quintus came to her side immediately. Are you all right? Am I all right? You just got threatened with losing your position. Mordain has been threatening that for decades. It means nothing. It didn't sound like nothing. Because he is angry that his play failed. Come, let us leave this place. They rode the elevator up in silence, emerged into the New York night. The car was waiting, and Quintus gave the driver the address of a hotel. I've booked us separate rooms, he told Vivienne. Unless you would prefer to return to your apartment tonight, I can arrange a flight. No, I'm too exhausted to travel. Separate rooms are fine. The hotel was quietly luxurious. Quintus walked her to her door, and they stood there for a moment in the hallway. Thank you for coming tonight, he said. Your presence helped more than you know. I didn't do anything except answer questions honestly. You stood in front of the Vampire Council and refused to be intimidated. You defended your right to make your own choices. That was not nothing. That was remarkable. Vivienne felt heat creep into her face. It was scary. I know. You did it anyway. That is the definition of bravery. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture courtly and sweet. Sleep well, Vivienne. We will return home tomorrow. But sleep did not come easily. Vivienne lay in the unfamiliar bed, replaying the evening, thinking about Mordain's cruelty and Quintus's steady defense, thinking about what it meant to be involved with someone who had political enemies and centuries of complicated history. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and wrapped herself in the hotel robe, stepping out onto her room's small balcony. The city glittered below, alive with light and movement. You should be resting. Vivienne jumped. Quintus stood on the neighboring balcony. His room must have been adjacent to hers. He was still dressed, looking out at the city with an unreadable expression. I could say the same to you, Vivienne pointed out. I do not sleep much. A few hours every few days is sufficient for my kind. That sounds lonely. It can be. The world is very quiet in the deep hours of the night. They stood in companionable silence for a while, separated by the gap between balconies but sharing the moment. Are you regretting this? Quintus asked quietly. Agreeing to try this relationship? Tonight showed you some of the complications you would face. I'm not regretting it, Vivienne said slowly. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. This is so much bigger than I anticipated. The politics, the danger, the scrutiny. You could walk away. I would not blame you. I don't want to walk away. But I need you to be honest with me. Is it always going to be like this? Council inquiries and political enemies and threats? Not always. But periodically, yes. I have power, which means I have rivals. I have lived a long time, which means I have accumulated enemies. That is the reality of my existence. I can offer you many things, Vivienne, but perfect safety is not one of them. No one can offer perfect safety. That's not exclusive to vampires. No, but the particular dangers are different. You saw Mordain tonight. He is ruthless and he holds grudges across centuries. If we continue this relationship, if we formalize it, he will see you as a potential weakness of mine. He may try to use you against me." "Let him try," Vivienne said, surprised by her own vehemence. "I'm not as weak as I look." Quintus turned to look at her fully, his red eyes catching the city lights. "I know you are not, but I would still prefer that you never have to prove that to someone like Mordain. Life doesn't give us preferences. We deal with what comes. You are wiser than your years suggest. I'm 28, not a child. Stop acting like my youth makes me naive. I do not think you naive. I think you are young and I am ancient, and I worry about the imbalance." Vivienne considered that. "Do you want to know what I think? I think you're using the age difference as an excuse to protect yourself. You're scared too. You're scared of watching me age and die, scared of getting attached and losing me, scared of feeling vulnerable after centuries of control. So you keep finding reasons why this shouldn't work instead of accepting that it might." Quintus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You see me very clearly. Someone has to. You're very good at being composed and authoritative, but underneath that you're just a person who's lonely and scared like everyone else. You just hide it better. I've had 800 years to practice hiding it. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." He looked at her across the gap between balconies, and something shifted in his expression, something vulnerable and real. "I'm terrified of losing you. Watching you age will be difficult. Watching you die will be agony. Knowing that is waiting makes me want to protect myself by maintaining distance. But I do not want distance. I want you. That conflict is difficult to navigate." "So we navigate it together," Vivienne said. "Neither of us has to figure this out alone. That's what a relationship is. I am not accustomed to navigating anything with someone else. I am used to making decisions alone. Then this will be good practice in collaboration." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "You are remarkable. I hope you know that." "I'm starting to believe it." They returned inside eventually, and Vivienne finally slept, feeling more settled than she had in days. The flight home the next afternoon was quiet. Quintus worked on his laptop while Vivienne read, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. When they landed, he drove her home personally rather than sending a car service. "Would you like to come up?" Vivienne found herself asking when they reached her building. "My roommate is out of town this weekend. We could talk without interruption." Something flickered in his expression. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." Her apartment was small but cozy, decorated in warm colors and crowded bookshelves. Quintus looked around with obvious interest, taking in the details that made up her life photographs of family and friends, art prints from museums she'd visited, a collection of coffee mugs that had accumulated over the years. "This is very you," he said, warm and welcoming. "It's not much compared to what you're probably used to. It is a home. That's worth more than luxury." She made coffee for herself, and, at his request, for him as well, even though he didn't need it. They sat on her couch, close but not touching, the afternoon light filtering through the windows. "What happens now?" Vivienne asked. "With Mordain? He will likely continue to probe for weaknesses. I will continue to defend my house and my choices. It is an old game between us." "Does he actually have grounds to challenge your leadership?" "Only if he can convince other houses to support him, which is unlikely. House Kassiel has strong alliances and good standing. His threats are more theatrical than practical." "And the security around me?" "Will remain in place for the foreseeable future. I'm not taking chances with your safety." Vivienne set down her coffee cup. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you actually see a future with me? Or am I a temporary thing, interesting because I'm different, but ultimately not someone you would actually build a life with?" Quintus turned to face her fully. "I see a future if you want one. I would court you properly, earn your trust and affection, and eventually ask you to marry me. If you said yes, I would bind myself to you for the rest of your life and however long beyond that I could manage without you. I would protect you, provide for you, and love you with everything I have. That is what I see. The question is whether that is something you could want." "I might want that," Vivienne admitted. "But I need to know all of it, the real costs. You said I would age while you stayed the same. What does that actually look like? How long could we realistically be together? Human lifespan with excellent health care and no major accidents? Perhaps 60 years together. I would watch you go from 28 to 88 while I remained physically unchanged. You would become elderly while I stayed young. That disparity would be difficult for you to accept emotionally and difficult for me to witness. Could you turn me, make me a vampire? Quintus went very still. That is possible, yes, but it is not a decision to be made lightly. Becoming a vampire means leaving behind everything you were. The transformation is painful. The adjustment takes decades. You would lose your human relationships eventually. Watching your family and friends age and die while you remain unchanged is its own agony. You would be binding yourself to centuries of existence with all the complications that entails. I would never ask that of you unless you genuinely wanted it. But if I did want it eventually, then I would turn you, yes, if you were certain, if you had lived enough human years to make an informed choice. But Vivienne, that is years away from being a relevant question. We have only just begun this relationship. Let us not rush toward permanent solutions. I'm not rushing. I'm gathering information so I can make informed choices. That's different. Fair enough. What else do you need to know? Can you have children? Can vampires and humans have children together? No. The transformation that makes us vampire renders us sterile. If you want children, you would need to have them while you are still human. I could not father them, but you could use human donors through medical intervention if you wished. I would raise them as my own, regardless of biological connection. Vivienne absorbed that. She hadn't seriously considered children yet, but knowing the option would close if she became a vampire felt significant. What about day-to-day life? She asked. You can't go out in daylight. How would that work if we lived together? You would adjust your schedule somewhat later mornings, more evening activities. I have light-proofed residences where we could be together safely. You could still maintain a day job if you wished, and we would spend evenings and nights together. Many vampire-human couples make similar arrangements successfully. It sounds isolating. It can be, but it can also be intimate. Time together becomes more precious when it must be carefully managed. They talked for hours, Vivienne asking every question she could think of, Quintus answering with careful honesty. He did not sugarcoat the difficulties, but he also did not exaggerate them. He painted a picture of what life with him would actually look like, the complications and the compensations. As evening fell and the apartment grew dark, Quintus stood to leave. I should go. You need rest and I have house obligations tonight. Vivienne walked him to the door. They stood in the threshold, neither quite ready to part. Thank you for being honest, Vivienne said, about all of it, the hard parts and the uncertain parts. You deserve honesty. You deserve to make choices with full information. I'm glad we're doing this, despite the complications. So am I. He lifted his hand and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. The gesture was tender, and Vivienne found herself leaning into it. May I kiss you? Quintus asked quietly. Yes. He kissed her carefully, his lips cool against hers, the contact gentle and questioning. Vivienne kissed him back, her hands finding his shoulders, and felt something settle into place inside her chest, a rightness she hadn't expected. When they parted, Quintus rested his forehead against hers briefly. I will call you tomorrow. I'll be waiting. He left, and Vivienne closed the door, pressing her back against it and smiling like an idiot. This was insane. She was dating an 800-year-old vampire with political enemies and an entire house to run. But somehow, impossibly, it felt right. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Quintus courted her properly, as he'd promised dinners and museum visits and long evening walks through the city. He sent flowers with thoughtful messages. He remembered small details she mentioned in passing. He asked about her work and listened with genuine interest. He also continued to be protective in ways that occasionally annoyed her. When she mentioned wanting to go to a friend's party across town, he insisted on having security follow her. When she stayed late at work, he would appear at her office building to walk her home. I don't need a bodyguard every moment of every day, Vivienne finally said, exasperated, after he'd appeared unannounced to escort her home from drinks with colleagues. The threat level has not decreased, Quintus said calmly. Mordain is still making inquiries about you. The human who vandalized my property has not been found. I am not willing to take risks with your safety. But I can't live my life constantly guarded. That's not living. That's hiding. It is being cautious. There is a difference. They argued about it, their first real disagreement. Quintus was immovable on the subject of her security. Vivienne was equally firm about maintaining her independence. Finally, they reached a compromise. Security would remain, but at a greater distance, intervening only if there was actual danger rather than simply hovering constantly. "You are stubborn," Quintus observed. "So are you. We match." He smiled at that. "I suppose we do." As November turned to December, Vivienne began spending more time at Quintus's primary residence, a converted warehouse in a quiet neighborhood that had been transformed into a light-proof sanctuary of dark wood and rich fabrics. The windows were covered with UV blocking shutters that could be lowered during the day. The bedroom was entirely internal, with no external walls. "This must have cost a fortune to modify," Vivienne said, exploring the space. "Wealth accumulates over centuries. I invest carefully. Money is not a concern." "That must be nice." "It removes certain worries. It does not remove others. I would trade considerable wealth for the ability to walk with you in sunlight." Vivienne turned to look at him. "You mean that?" "Of course I mean it. There are many things I would trade for the chance to be fully part of your world, rather than requiring you to adapt to mine." She crossed to him, taking his hands. "I don't mind adapting. You're worth it." He pulled her closer, and they kissed with more intensity than before, weeks of building tension finding release. His hands were careful on her back, his strength leashed, and Vivienne felt safe, despite being very aware of the danger he could pose if he lost control. When they parted, both breathing harder, Quintus rested his forehead against hers. "I want you, but I need you to be certain before we move forward. I need to be certain I can maintain control." "Are you uncertain?" "I'm always somewhat uncertain when strong emotion is involved. I have not been with anyone in many years. I have not felt this intensely in longer than that. I do not want to harm you through carelessness. Then we go slow. We learn together what works and what doesn't. But Quintus, I do want this. I want you." They moved to the bedroom, and what followed was careful and intense and profoundly intimate. Quintus was exceedingly gentle, checking in constantly, making sure she was comfortable. His control was perfect throughout, and afterward he held her with fierce tenderness. "You are precious to me," he whispered against her hair. "More precious than I have words to express." "You're precious to me too," Vivienne said softly. "I think I'm falling in love with you." He went very still. "Truly?" "Truly. I didn't expect this. I thought I was going to stay single for a while after Marcus, figure out who I was without him. But then you happened, and everything changed. You are the finest thing that has occurred in my very long existence," Quintus said quietly. "I have loved before, but not like this. This feels different, essential." "I love you," Vivienne said, testing the words. They felt right. "Is that too fast? We've only been together a few months." "Time is relative. I have known people for decades without coming to love them. I have loved you since I watched you stand up for that junior colleague at the spring conference, refusing to let her work be stolen. I simply did not have the opportunity to tell you until now." They stayed in his bed through the night, talking in the darkness, sharing pieces of themselves. Vivienne told him about her childhood, about her family dynamics, about dreams she'd set aside and ones she still hoped to achieve. Quintus told her about his human life, 800 years distant now, but still sharp in memory. "I was a minor lord's son," he said. "Fourth born, which meant I had few prospects. I was scholarly rather than martial, which disappointed my father. I spent my time reading and learning languages while my brothers trained for war. When the vampire who turned me offered immortality and knowledge, I accepted without fully understanding the cost. I was 23 years old and thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. Do you regret it? Sometimes I lost my family, my humanity, my connection to the church I'd been raised in. The early years were very difficult. But I have also experienced wonders beyond anything my mortal life could have offered. I have seen the world transform. I have loved remarkable people. I have built something meaningful with my house. So no, overall I do not regret it. But I carry grief for what was lost. Do you remember your family? Their faces have faded, though I remember emotional essences, my mother's kindness, my father's sternness. My brother's easy camaraderie, I outlived them all by centuries. That weight never fully lifts. Vivienne held him tighter, offering comfort for losses 800 years old, but still aching. As winter deepened, they settled into genuine partnership. Vivienne met members of Quintus's house, his second-in-command, Helena, who was sharp and efficient, his advisor Marcus, who shared history books with Vivienne and discussed vampire politics, his household staff, a mix of vampires and humans who had worked for House Kassiel for years. They welcomed her cautiously but genuinely, and Vivienne found herself being drawn into Quintus's world in ways both strange and wonderful. She also introduced him to her world. He met her roommate Sarah, who was starstruck and awkward but ultimately declared Quintus surprisingly normal for a vampire lord. He met her work friends, her college roommate visiting from Texas, her younger sister who video called and demanded to know if he was treating Vivienne properly. "I'm doing my best," Quintus told her sister gravely, and the seriousness of his tone made Vivienne laugh. "He's good to me," Vivienne assured her sister, "better than anyone has been." For Christmas, Vivienne invited Quintus to her family home in Texas. He hesitated, worried about disrupting her family time, but she insisted, "If we're doing this, if we're building something real, you need to meet my family. And they need to see that you're not some scary vampire overlord. You're just a person I love who happens to be undead." Her family's reactions ranged from curiosity to mild alarm to enthusiastic acceptance. Her mother was cautiously welcoming, asking careful questions about his intentions. Her father was suspicious until Quintus spent an hour discussing history with him and revealed a comprehensive knowledge of Texas history that won him over. Her sister thought the whole thing was wildly romantic. Watching Quintus navigate her family dinner with old-fashioned courtesy and genuine interest made Vivienne love him more. He was trying, making an effort to fit into her world, despite how foreign it must seem to him. On Christmas Eve, after her family had gone to bed, Vivienne and Quintus sat on the back porch, watching the stars. "Your family is lovely," Quintus said quietly. "You are fortunate to have them." "I know. Thank you for coming, for making an effort." "I would do far more than this for you." She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and warm despite the December cold. "I've been thinking about the future, about what you said regarding turning." Quintus went still. "Have you reached any conclusions?" "Not decisions, but I'm thinking that if we're still together in a few years, if this continues to be what it is now, I might want that. The turning. The chance to be with you for centuries instead of decades. But I want to live as a human first. Experience things, achieve goals, make sure I'm not running toward turning because of fear of missing out on time with you. That is wise. There should be no rush. Would you want that? For me to turn eventually?" "Yes," Quintus admitted. "Selfishly, yes. The thought of having centuries with you instead of decades is deeply appealing. But only if you genuinely want it, not because you feel pressured by our different lifespans." "I'll want it," Vivienne said with growing certainty. "I'm not sure when, but I think I'll want it eventually." They sat in comfortable silence, planning a future that stretched beyond human lifespans into something extraordinary. January brought new complications. Someone leaked photos of Vivienne and Quintus together to tabloids, sparking renewed interest in their relationship. The headlines were mostly silly, "Vampire Lord's Human Lover," Twilight IRL, but some were uglier, questioning why Quintus would lower himself to dating a human or suggesting Vivienne was using him for his wealth. The attention was exhausting. Vivienne found herself being recognized on the street, stopped for photos, asked intrusive questions. She handled it with as much grace as she could manage, but it wore on her. I hate this," she told Quintus after a particularly bad day where someone had followed her for 3 blocks taking photos. "I hate that our relationship is entertainment for strangers." "We could make a statement," Quintus suggested. "Ask for privacy. Most reputable outlets would respect that." "Would they?" "Some would. Not all, but we could try." They released a brief statement through House Kassiel's communications office, requesting privacy and noting that they were in a committed relationship, but would not be sharing details publicly. It helped somewhat, though photos still appeared periodically. In February, Quintus's council prediction came true. Lord Mordain formally challenged Quintus's leadership of House Kassiel, triggering a formal review process that would take months to resolve. "This is my fault," Vivienne said when Quintus told her. "He's using me against you." "No. He's using my announcement against me, which was my choice. You are not responsible for his political maneuvering. But if we were not together, he would find some other excuse. Mordain has wanted to weaken House Kassiel for decades. This is simply his latest attempt. It will fail, as the others have." "You sound certain?" "I am certain. House Kassiel has stood for 3,000 years. It will survive Mordain's pettiness." The review process was brutal. It required Quintus to document every major decision he'd made as House Lord for the past century, to defend his financial management, his diplomatic relations, his internal house governance. He spent long hours preparing materials, meeting with lawyers and advisors, building his defense. Vivienne saw less of him during this period, but he called every night, his voice tired but steady. "I miss you," he would say. "I miss you too. Come see me when you can." He would appear at midnight sometimes, exhausted and strained, and Vivienne would hold him while he decompressed. She learned to be his safe space, the place where he could set down his authority and just be himself. In April, the Vampire Council announced they would hold a formal hearing to address Mordain's challenge. It would be public within Vampire Society, with all 7 houses in attendance. "I want to be there," Vivienne said immediately. "It will be unpleasant. Mordain will likely attack me through attacking you." "Then I should definitely be there. I won't let him trash me without defending myself." Quintus smiled despite his stress. "You are fierce. Very well. I will arrange for your attendance." The hearing was held in the same underground chambers in New York. This time, the circular room was filled with vampires, representatives from all 7 houses, witnesses, advisors, all of them ancient and powerful, and watching with predatory interest. Vivienne sat in the observer section, wearing her most professional clothing, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. Lord Mordain presented his challenge first, outlining every decision Quintus had made that Mordain deemed questionable. The list was long and detailed, going back decades, but the heart of it, the emotional core, was the engagement announcement. "Lord Kassiel has allowed personal sentiment to compromise his judgment," Mordain argued. "He announced an engagement to a human woman on impulse, without consultation, creating a spectacle that drew unwanted attention to our community. He has since been distracted by this relationship, spending time and resources on security for his human lover rather than focusing on house business. He has shown himself to be emotionally unstable and unsuited for leadership." When Quintus stood to respond, his voice was calm and factual. He walked through each of Mordain's accusations methodically, providing documentation that refuted claims of financial mismanagement, showing communications that proved his diplomatic efforts had been successful, presenting house records that demonstrated continued prosperity under his leadership. On the personal matter, he was direct. "I announced my engagement impulsively, yes. I have acknowledged that error and accepted appropriate consequences. However, my relationship with Miss Torres has not compromised my effectiveness as House Lord. House Kassiel's financial position is actually strengthened during our relationship. Our diplomatic standing remains excellent, and internal house satisfaction has increased. Personal happiness has made me more effective, not less." "Personal happiness built on foolishness," Mordain sneered. "You have endangered a human through your selfishness. The attack on your property, the media attention, the ongoing security concerns, all of it stems from your poor judgment." "The attack on my property stems from someone else's hatred," Quintus said quietly but firmly. "I will not accept responsibility for the violent actions of others. Yes, there have been security concerns. I've addressed them appropriately. Miss Torres has been protected, and no harm has come to her. That is effective leadership, not failed judgment. She is a weakness, an obvious vulnerability that enemies will exploit. Then let them try." Quintus's voice was cold now, dangerous. "I have protected what I value for 800 years. I will continue to do so. And Mordain, if you are threatening Miss Torres, be very clear about what that would mean. An attack on her would be an attack on House Kassiel itself. I trust you understand the consequences of that." The room went absolutely silent. Threatening war between houses was serious business. Lady Seraphine intervened. "Lord Kassiel, No one is threatening your intended. Lord Mordain is questioning whether your personal attachments have compromised your leadership. That is his right under review protocols. And I am answering that question, Quintus said, not backing down. My personal attachments have not compromised my effectiveness. My house is strong. My people are protected. My obligations are met. If Lord Mordain believes otherwise, he should provide evidence, not innuendo. Mordain tried. For hours he tried, bringing forward witnesses who questioned Quintus's recent decisions, presenting communications that Mordain claimed showed distraction, arguing that vampire lords should be above human entanglements. But for each attack, Quintus had a response. He was prepared, controlled, and utterly unshakable. He defended not just his decisions, but his right to have a personal life, to choose his own relationships, to be something more than just a political figure. Finally, Lady Seraphine called for testimony from House Kassiel members. Helena, Quintus's second-in-command, stood and faced the council. I have served House Kassiel for 300 years, she said clearly. I have served under 2 different lords, and I tell you with absolute certainty that Lord Quintus Kassiel is the finest leader our house has known. He is just, strategic, and deeply committed to our welfare. His relationship with Miss Torres has not diminished his effectiveness. If anything, it has made him more approachable, more understanding of the human world we must navigate. House Kassiel stands firmly behind our Lord. Other House Kassiel members echoed her statement. The united front was impressive and clearly surprised Mordain. When it came time for the council to deliberate, they withdrew for 2 hours. Vivienne sat with Quintus in a side chamber, holding his hand. Whatever happens, we'll handle it, she told him. Yes, he agreed. Together. The council returned with their verdict. Lady Seraphine spoke. This council has reviewed the challenge brought by Lord Mordain against Lord Kassiel. We find no evidence of compromised judgment or ineffective leadership. Lord Kassiel's personal relationship does not constitute grounds for removal from his position. The challenge is dismissed. Lord Kassiel will retain his position as head of House Kassiel with this council's full confidence. Relief flooded through Vivienne. Quintus simply nodded, unsurprised but clearly pleased. Mordain stood abruptly. This is a mistake. You are allowing sentiment to cloud. The matter is closed, Lord Mordain, Lady Seraphine said firmly. If you continue to pursue this vendetta, you may find yourself facing questions about your own judgment. I suggest you let this go. Mordain left the chamber furious, and Vivienne knew this wasn't truly over. He would still be an enemy, still look for ways to undermine Quintus. But he had failed today, and that was what mattered. Outside the council chambers, Quintus pulled Vivienne into a quiet corner and kissed her deeply. Thank you for being here, for supporting me through this. Always, I love you. I love you, more than I can express. They returned to the city exhausted but victorious. That night, in Quintus's bedroom, he turned to Vivienne with unusual seriousness. I know I announced our engagement months ago without your consent. I know we agreed to take things slowly, to let our relationship develop naturally. But Vivienne, I would like to ask you properly now, not because of politics or public pressure, but because I genuinely want to marry you. Will you actually, truly marry me? Vivienne's breath caught. Are you serious? Entirely serious. I am asking you with full respect for your autonomy and your right to refuse whether you would be willing to bind your life to mine, to become my wife, my partner, my chosen companion for as long as we are both living. No cameras, no announcements, just you and I and the question of whether we want to make this official. Yes, Vivienne said without hesitation. Yes, I want to marry you. Quintus pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple band with a dark ruby set in silver. This belonged to my mother. It is one of the few possessions I have retained from my human life. I would be honored if you would wear it. Tears pricked Vivienne's eyes as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the metal cool against her skin. It's beautiful. You are beautiful. You are remarkable. You are everything I never thought I would find again. They held each other in the darkness, 2 people from completely different worlds who had somehow found each other. The following weeks were spent planning a wedding. Vivienne wanted something small and private, family and close friends only. No media circus. Quintus agreed immediately, grateful to keep the event intimate. They married on a June evening in the private gardens of one of Quintus's properties. The ceremony took place at twilight, after sunset, but while the sky still held light, a compromise between Vivienne's daylight world and Quintus's nocturnal existence. Vivienne wore a simple white dress. Quintus wore formal clothing from his own era, updated slightly for modernity. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, speaking of partnership and choice and love that transcended expected boundaries. When Quintus kissed his bride, Vivienne felt complete in a way she had never experienced before. This was right. This was home. The reception was small and warm, humans and vampires mingling with surprisingly little awkwardness. Vivienne's mother cried happy tears. Her father shook Quintus's hand and told him, "You take care of my daughter, or you answer to me, vampire lord, or not." Quintus smiled and promised, "I will protect her with everything I have, sir. You have my word." They danced in the garden as the stars came out, and Quintus held Vivienne like she was the most precious thing in existence. "How does it feel to be married?" Vivienne asked, swaying with him. "Perfect, terrifying, perfect." "Same." They honeymooned at a remote estate in Scotland, where Quintus could move freely in the long summer evenings, and Vivienne could explore medieval ruins and rolling hills during the day. They spent their nights talking and making love and planning their future. "I want to wait a few years," Vivienne said one evening, curled against his side in bed, before turning. "I want to experience some things as human first travel in daylight, maybe have a child if we decide to. Just live as I am now for a bit longer." "Whatever you want. There is no rush. We have time. Do you want children?" "If I did?" Quintus was quiet for a moment. "I have never been a father. The idea is both appealing and frightening. But yes, if you wanted a child, I would want that too. I would love them as fiercely as I love you. Then maybe in a couple of years, after we've settled into being married, after we've had more time just being us." "That sounds perfect." They returned from their honeymoon to find that the viral video from the industry gala had been largely forgotten, replaced by newer scandals and stories. Vivienne and Quintus had become simply another married couple, unusual but no longer noteworthy. Vivienne kept working, advancing in her career with Quintus's support and encouragement. He consulted her on modern marketing strategies for House Kassiel's businesses, valuing her expertise. She learned vampire politics and history, becoming an unofficial advisor on human perspectives. 2 years after their wedding, Vivienne made the decision she'd been contemplating. She was ready to have a child to experience that human milestone before turning. Quintus supported her fully, and they began the process of selecting a donor and arranging artificial insemination. When Vivienne became pregnant, Quintus was tender and attentive, in ways that made her fall in love with him all over again. He read obsessively about pregnancy and child development, asking her doctor questions that spanned centuries of medical knowledge. He prepared their home meticulously, ensuring everything was safe and perfect. Their son was born on a cold January night, arriving screaming and healthy into Quintus's careful hands. Vivienne had asked him to be present for the birth despite his concerns about the blood, and he had managed perfectly, his control absolute, even in such an intense moment. They named him Nathaniel Kassiel, and Quintus held his son with wonder and fierce protectiveness. "He is perfect," Quintus whispered, tears in his eyes the first time Vivienne had seen him cry. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." Watching Quintus with Nathaniel was extraordinary. This ancient vampire, this lord of 1,000 years, reduced to cooing nonsense and singing lullabies in dead languages. He was an attentive, devoted father, marveling at every milestone. When Nathaniel was 3 years old and beginning to ask why Daddy slept during the day, Vivienne broached the subject of turning again. "I'm ready," she told Quintus one evening after Nathaniel was asleep. "I want more time with you than a human lifetime allows. I want to see Nathaniel grow up without aging past him. I want centuries with you. I'm ready." Quintus took her hands. "Are you certain? Truly certain? There is no undoing this once it is done." "I'm certain. I've lived as human. I've experienced what I needed to experience. Now, I want to choose you, choose us, choose forever. Then I will turn you. but we will do it carefully with full preparation. The transformation is painful and dangerous. I want every possible safeguard in place." They spent weeks preparing. Quintus consulted with other ancient vampires about best practices. He ensured they had medical support available. He arranged for Nathaniel to stay with Vivienne's family during the transformation, sparing him the trauma of witnessing his mother's turning. On a spring evening, with everything in place, Vivienne lay in Quintus's arms and said, "I'm ready. Make me yours forever." The bite was sharp and bright. The venom that followed was agony, her entire body burning and remaking itself. Quintus held her through all of it, speaking to her in soft languages older than England, promising that she would survive, that she was strong enough. The transformation took 3 days. When Vivienne woke on the third evening, the world had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents overwhelmingly complex. She could hear Quintus's breathing across the room, could sense his presence like a beacon. "How do you feel?" he asked, approaching carefully. "Different. Everything is different." Her hunger was overwhelming, but Quintus had prepared. He gave her donated blood, teaching her to feed without losing control. It was strange and primal and satisfying in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Over the following weeks, he taught her how to manage her new abilities, the strength, the speed, the enhanced senses. He taught her vampire history and law, introducing her formally to House Kassiel as its new lady. Nathaniel adjusted surprisingly well to his mother's transformation. To him, she was still mommy, just different now. And he loved that he could play with her at night, that she could tell him stories about all the years Daddy had lived, that she would be there always now. Years passed. Decades. Vivienne never aged beyond 28, forever young while watching the world change around her. She and Quintus raised Nathaniel together, and later his siblings when they chose to expand their family. She became a skilled diplomat within vampire society, using her unique perspective as a formerly human vampire to bridge cultural gaps. Mordain continued his occasional attempts to undermine House Kassiel, but they always failed. Vivienne and Quintus were too strong together, their partnership unshakable. On the 100th anniversary of the night, Quintus had first announced their engagement on that viral video, an event now part of vampire human history. They stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. "Do you ever regret it?" Quintus asked, as he sometimes did. "Choosing this life?" "Never," Vivienne said, as she always did. "You are the best choice I ever made." He pulled her close, and they watched the sunrise together through specially designed UV-protected glass, a small concession to the human experience she had given up. "I love you," Quintus said. "I will love you for all the centuries remaining to us." "I love you too. Forever." They stood together, two people who had found each other across impossible divides, who had chosen love despite complications and danger and the weight of time itself. The viral video that had started it all was ancient history now, but its impact remained a reminder that sometimes the most public beginnings led to the most private happiness. Behind them, their family slept children and grandchildren, humans and vampires, all protected by the fierce devotion of two people who had learned that consent and choice were the foundations of real love. Quintus had learned to ask rather than assume. Vivienne had learned that strength meant embracing what she wanted rather than accepting what others said she should want. Together, they had built something extraordinary, and they would protect it, nurture it, and celebrate it for centuries to come. The story that began with humiliation at a gala ended with love that transcended mortality itself. And in the quiet moments before dawn, with centuries stretching ahead of them, Vivienne and Quintus held each other and knew that every difficult choice, every challenge overcome, every moment of vulnerability shared had been worth it. They had found forever, and they had found it together.